Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about my guest who's joining me here today. Candace Craw-Goldman has been on the show before. She was, and actually still is, a student of the amazing and wonderful Dolores Cannon, who created the quantum healing technique. And right now, Candace is a quantum healer. She is an N5D radio show host, and she is the founder of the original quantum healing support forum and the creator of the world online searchable directory for healers of all modalities. I'm going to have to talk to you about that, Candace. Anyway, so without further ado, let me welcome Candace back to the show. Welcome back, Candace. How are you? You look great.
Oh, thanks, Bernard. You look good. Wonderful as well. You know, I remember the last time we talked, I was actually hiding out in my basement. I think there was some noise going on in my house, but I'm not in my basement today.
Okay.
I'm in my
Right?
studio. I'm so happy to be back. It has been too long because I know we had such a great time last time we talked. Glad we're doing it again.
Yes, me too. Me too. Thank you, Candace, and thank you for agreeing to come back on. For our listeners that may not remember your last visit, or maybe this is the first time they're hearing about your work, tell us a little bit about how this all started for you. How did you get involved working with Dolores, and what's been going on since she's passed?
Oh my gosh, how many hours is the show?
Well, we got about 20 minutes before the next commercial, so take your time.
Well, sure, I'll try to be brief about all that. Well, let's see. So my story basically is I was your regular person, you know, married, had kids. I was working as a freelance artist and photographer. I'd been doing that for many years. I had a perfectly fine life. I thought I was doing everything I wanted and needed to be doing in my life. But I kept having issues with my health. And the first place that brought me to, in about the year 2000, was to Reiki, when I first became aware of this idea that there may be something else I could do except for go to doctors, because the doctors weren't helping me. They weren't helping me at all. Their only solutions were chemicals and drugs, which never helped and most of the time backfired. And I was watching this pattern just go. And I was being the good girl. I was doing what the doctor said. Nothing ever helped. And I finally found Reiki, and that was great. However, it didn't solve all my problems. It certainly made me feel empowered, and I kind of opened my eyes to what was possible in the world, not only with healing, but understanding human consciousness and what real reality was, etc. And my health kept being a problem. It was never anything terminal. I never had cancer or anything like that. But what I did have were just kind of continual problems. And most of them had to do with pain. And they just kept slowing me down. And I kind of had that, as so many of us do, I kind of had that dark night of the soul moment where I actually was doing very well as a photographer. I was in Austin, Texas. I was doing photography for bands and for rodeos, and it was going along fine. And I actually had this big shoot coming up, a great big shoot, where I was helping do the third album for a country and western singer there, and it was an 8-month production, and it was the night before the shoot of the production. And it was the biggest one I ever had. I had lights, I had a set, I had all this stuff. And I woke up the next day and I couldn't get out of bed because of the pain. And, most days I could sort of do stuff. There were days where I couldn't do anything. And I literally couldn't move. And everything just crashed as far as that photo shoot.
Oh, wow.
And I felt like, totally like loser, just loser. I was embarrassed. I just didn't know. And I laid in bed that day, mostly because I couldn't get up, but also I just allowed myself to think a little bit. And that's when everything changed. So this was shortly before I met and learned about Dolores Cannon a few months before. And what happened was I actually decided that I was going to talk to the universe. Not that I hadn't before, but I changed my question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I changed my question. My question always was, how do I fix this? How do I get better? How do I heal myself? How do I stop having pain? How do I stop having these problems? That was always my question to the universe. But something about blowing that photography shoot and laying in bed, I changed the question to, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to do now? It was single-minded. What am I supposed to do now? And I basically had the most profound spiritual out-of-body experience of my life at that moment. I literally was transported out of my body. I stood in front of what I now know to be my light council. And I saw these beings there. They were sitting in a half circle. And I'm just standing in the most gorgeous place ever, and so completely overwhelmed with the magic of what was going on. And the center being of the light council, which I now know or consider to be my higher self, mm-hmm. stood up and literally, Bernard, handed me a piece of paper. And handed me a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper there was a list of 3 things. And one was to go to my doctor and tell him I'm tired, number 1. Number 2 was to volunteer for an organization that did infant bereavement photography. But the number 3 on that list was go have a past life regression.
Ooh.
And I got up out of that bed and I started to work on my list. And absolutely everything fell into place like I was on candid camera, like there was a movie camera following me around, including the past life regression part. And I found myself headed to Arkansas, headed to Dolores Cannon's class. This was in 2008. Everything lined it up just perfectly so that I could be there. And on the way there, I knew in my heart, I absolutely knew without any doubt that I was going to be the demonstration subject in her class, even though that was never anything figured out in advance. She did it on the fly. And I'm in her class, and, there's about 30 of us there, and probably 30 or 29 of us asked Dolores to be the demonstration student. And I knew it was going to be me, but I didn't ask. And I didn't ask almost like a test. Right? Almost like I was testing everything. And sure enough, when it came time to choose the demonstration student, she stood up and said, now most of you put your name on this list, but I have to go choose this person in the classroom. And she walked over and stood in front of me. And that's when my entire life changed, 100%, right at that moment. And I understood what it was like to listen to my higher self, to trust my higher self. And I became a devotee of Dolores Cannon and her method from that moment on. And I knew nothing about working with clients, nothing with regression hypnosis. I didn't know any of that. But I quickly started to work with Dolores to assist other people just like me who didn't know anything, but to keep them supported throughout their journey of helping others. And I started that back in 2008 and have been continuing. We continued all the way up until Dolores's death. But shortly after Dolores's death, the organization that distributes her class decided to make a lot of changes, one of which was to no longer support what we and I were doing. And like you with your hurricane story, as one thing closes and folds, another thing opens. Yeah. And so what has happened since then is that we've expanded, and we now not only support those who practice the method that Dolores Cannon taught us, or variations of that method, or combinations with other things. We've now opened our doors and our directory to support healers all across the world, and it's such an exciting time to be alive and to assist others in waking of their consciousness, and we're right there assisting all of you out there. So yeah, that's where I am today. Things couldn't be more exciting.
Oh, how wonderful. I'm so glad to hear all of that, Candace. That's great. Let me ask you something. So we're talking about healing here. We're talking about the work that you learned from Dolores. A lot of people, including myself a few years ago, didn't really know what quantum healing was. What was this method that she was talking about? You know, a lot of us knew her, like myself. I came to Dolores's work with her work with extraterrestrials, ETs, transdimensional entities, and a little bit about past life regression. And that was kind of the general idea that I knew about her, but I didn't really quite understand what the quantum healing method was. Can you share a little bit about what is different about the quantum healing method that she taught?
Sure. So when I took her class back in 2008, at that time it was still called Dolores Cannon's Method of Past Life Regression. And quite frankly, it hadn't changed from the year and the time that she had developed it, and that was actually 1998. She actually, you know, the they team, the higher beings whom she communicated with, basically were saying, you need to get out there and teach your method to others. So she did that in 1998, and it was called Dolores Cannon's Method of Past Life Regression. But something started happening when she was doing these past life regressions. They started to be about things other than past life. So, right. And so they started dribbling in, though, Bernard. They didn't start out that way. And that's the really interesting part about this, because when she would teach and talk about her work, she would always talk about being spoon-fed, right? Where what she was ready for was what would happen in her sessions. So it all started out almost as a fluke, as an accident anyway, her work with past life. She started out being a hobby with her husband to help people relax, and people, one woman in particular, just spontaneously slipped into a past life. Dolores Cannon never set out to study any of this. It all just came to her, and then she opened up the doors to it and expanded it. So even though right now those who teach her method purely, or some variation of it, depending on whoever it is that you talk to, although it's called quantum healing, and she changed the name somewhere in about 2012, she changed it. She thought she had to change the name of this method because it ended up being something like only about a third of the people who would, you know, try this method with a facilitator would go to a past life. Others would experience things like you're talking about, interdimensional, ET kind of lives. You know, regularly, even now, we have clients who experience the life as a bird or a stone, or, you know, the color purple. And yes, absolutely, that kind of stuff happens. You know, some are single-celled organisms. One of the most interesting ones I ever had was I had a woman who experienced a lifetime, if you want to call it that, as a piece of gravity on the moon. Now wrap your head around that one.
Yeah, I'm trying. But okay, right, so it's consciousness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So that's, you know, so she thought, I can't call this past life regression anymore. So that's why she changed the name. But it doesn't, the method is so beautiful, so variable. And And it's really very simple, as a matter of fact. So she would teach this method, but it's basically it's very, very simple, and it's something that anybody doesn't even need this method to do. And that is basically trust yourself, or trust a practitioner. You don't always need a practitioner. Trust yourself, get in a relaxed place, have some sort of experience, talk to your higher self. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's what it is. But it was her writing that brought it to life. She took the stories of her clients and wrote all of her amazing books, and that's how we all fell in love with her. And so that's kind of the story of Dolores. And I was so blessed to be able to assist her both in day-to-day kind of operations with support form and also teaching until she passed. And I am just so grateful for the time I got to spend with her. And she took you might call, in her books, she says that people go to the resting place after they pass, and that's indeed where Dolores Cannon went. And then after a few months, she kind of started hanging out in fourth density and in the astral kind of realms. And many, many people started hearing from Dolores, practitioners, clients, and even people who didn't know who Dolores Cannon was. And Bernard, you can't believe this, but I still regularly get people who call me up on the phone and say, I don't think you're going to believe this, but I have been hearing this woman in my head.
That's great.
Or in my dreams. And she says she's Dolores, and I just usually, I smile and I say, I believe you. I absolutely believe you. Because she spent her life talking with people in other realms.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't she come back and talk to us? She is. Absolutely she is.
Oh, I believe that wholeheartedly. Absolutely. I don't know if you know who Dion Fortune is, but she was a early 20th century occultist or practitioner, magical practitioner. And the same thing, her group carried on after she passed, and she would communicate through one of the members, and they just kept meeting with her after she passed on. So I can believe someone of Dolores's light is certainly hanging around and hopefully still teaching and guiding.
She is. And what's interesting, though, is it's kind of like, you've got to imagine once you pass from here, your viewpoint has expanded. So, there's different aspects of her as a teacher coming through. And I think, kind of like through a kaleidoscope or something in that way, coming through differently depending on who needs to hear what and whatever the particular situation is. So, but I absolutely believe, and just like what happened with just recently, the Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay, and they died, almost on the same day, a year apart. And Dolores passed within hours of Masaru Emoto. And it's my understanding that they are very closely working together now on the other side of the realm. And she comes back with information directly from him about water and about our sessions, and about how she actually is calling water liquid consciousness. And that's one. Have you been thirsty lately? I can't keep enough water inside of me.
Very true. I have been so thirsty for the last week or so.
Ever since the eclipse.
Probably, yeah.
I cannot keep enough water in me. This is because we did go through an expansion and another opening up of light and consciousness, and it's coming in. That water is almost like the oil or the fuel or the lubrication of your consciousness. So she has been coming in and saying, when you're going to do anything, and that's whether mediumship or channeling or intending to have a lucid dream or having a quantum healing session, any of that, guess what? One of the best things you can do is just drink some water.
Chug some water, yeah.
Extra water.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I can relate to that. I can totally relate to that. And, it's very interesting. So many of us, a good friend of ours, Ann Gail Rose, I don't know if you know, she's working with water now and doing different concoctions with energetics and into the water
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. And there is definitely something going on. So I wonder, we've only got about 3 minutes left before the commercial. Can you expand a little bit about what your observations have been on this eclipse? What else is going on? We've got more light coming through. I've seen people post, "Oh, we're in 5D." I'm like, well, maybe some of us are in 5D. I don't know, but
Oh my gosh, that's a huge subject, but it's just doing more revealing, right?
mm,
The thing that I'm finding about the entire year of 2017 is you're just not going to be able to hide your shit, right?
hmm
You just can't hide. No more hiding, no more hiding from yourself, no more hiding from others, no more pretending, none of that. It's more and more we're just getting rid of the layers and we're becoming more and more authentic and more individualistic. But at the same time, as we are finding our authenticity as individuals, we're finding it easier to connect to other people. That's what's becoming so amazing, I think, about this year and the eclipse and then this hurricane. And there's a lot of connections between us and the elements, us and other people, us and the organizations like government and religion, and how that's falling apart, and how we are redefining ourselves as human beings and redefining our lives. And the eclipse was something about the shadow portion of us, right? Like
hmm
accepting that part of us, and integrating that part of us, and stopping hiding that part of us, and shining a light on the part of us. And I know that there's some wonderful thinkers out there who have been talking a lot about what happened during the eclipse. And one of my favorite is Sandra Walters, some of her ideas about the beautiful crown around the eclipse, where the sun comes through, and how that's the Christ consciousness. And I don't know about you, but here's where I felt the eclipse, right up here in my crown. It was so strong. And I think it's just helped us go where we're going.
I couldn't agree more. I felt so much energy that day. Actually, we did a working my local group here. We have a grove. I have a grove that I work with, and the whole intention and the energy of it was enough is enough with the old, time to let it go, time to step into our divine selves and to really know that it's there. And I really felt the same thing coming through my head, going into my heart, and coming out of my heart. It was almost my visualization was seeing the energy coming out of my heart and literally rippling around the planet. It was just a great feeling of time, like you said, stepping into our own and realizing, bringing it into fruition instead of talking about it, walking the talk. Okay, well, we're at a commercial, and we are going to continue our discussion with Candace when we return. We'll be right back. How many times have we ignored our intuition, believing it to be the ego? Or how many times have you dismissed messages from spirit guides or your higher self or beings inside of a dream and just think that you're crazy and ignore it? We ask ourselves, and many people have asked me this question, I have a hard time differentiating between my ego, my higher self, my source consciousness, or spirit guides, or angels, or whatever it is that you might be communicating. Many of us lack trust in trusting that it is not ego, in trusting that it is our intuition, and maybe even following through when it's intuition, higher self, or spirit guide. So that seems to be pretty prevalent, especially for those of us in the going through this awakening together. We've been trained to ignore this kind of stuff. So I say that now, in this time, in this era that we are in, it is more important than ever that we must learn to decipher between these three, to know the difference between ego, to understand what is consciousness, to be able to tell when your higher self is communicating with you, or even your guides. Also, also, I just wanted to let everybody know that if you would like to connect with me live, I am going to be doing a wonderful workshop here in Roanoke, Virginia, on how to meet your spirit guides. And it's going to be about a 5-hour course, 4 to 5 hour course. We'll be covering everything on how to tell the difference between your ego chatter versus your higher self chatter versus your spiritual guides, and how to connect with them. And that will be September 29th at the Roanoke Diversity Center in Roanoke, Virginia. You can go to bernardalvarez.com and click on the Connect with Bernard live button, and it will give you all the information. If you're interested as well, if you can't make it to Roanoke, I do have an online version of this course on my website as well. So this is going to be my online course being done in real life, which is a lot more fun being face-to-face. Anyway, let's welcome Candace back to the show. Welcome back, Candace. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Oh, good, good, good. I'm really enjoying our talk, and I know that you have been doing a lot of work since working with Dolores and trying to help, I don't want to say bring the healing community together, but at least be able for the average person to be able to connect with healers around the world. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing there?
Sure. Well, it comes as no surprise, I don't think, to you or really anyone who's interested in this stuff, who follows, these kinds of communities and shows, that many of us are just passionate about this idea of expansion of consciousness and having more control over our own lives, our own realms, our own health, all of that. And so many of us take these classes. In my own story, I started out learning Reiki, and then I took Dolores's class. And then after Dolores's class, boy, I took a bunch of other things too, because they supported all of it, right? They supported my understanding of all of it. So I took classes in mediumship. I took EFT classes. I took quantum touch classes. I took a Russian class learning how to, called cellular and organ regeneration. I took all of these classes. And and I'm not alone. There are so many practitioners out there who, some of them have favorite things they like to do, things that they're known for, etc. But many, many, many of us have all of these tools. And as an example, I may have a client who is far more interested in just talking to me as a consultant for an hour than having a full-blown quantum healing session. I may have another client who's more interested in having me write them a meditation or do some distance healing with Reiki than having a full-blown quantum healing session. So there are so many of us who do that. And as I've always supported Dolores' practitioners, and then when we became an independent entity after Dolores' death, I wanted to focus on that aspect, that we do all of this, right? So many of us do all of this. Many are clinical hypnotherapists, etc. Yeah. And there are many people out there who have figured out how to do their own thing, all on their own. And here is one person who I'm guessing many of your audience will already know, and she's a very valuable member of our community, and that is Alba Weinman from Miami, Florida. Alba was in the class that I was assisting with Dolores teaching, I believe in 2013, maybe, or something like that. I'd already been assisting Dolores for several years. Alba shows up, and she just took to this method like a duck to water. And she was so amazing at it. But she kind of grew into a direction that is purely Alba Weinman now, purely, and has sort of moved away. So our directory and now our support forum is opening up a section for all of those people as well. People who are interested in using all of their tools to assist others, and having a place on the internet where clients can find them. So our website is called quantumhealingpractitioners.com. I know it's a long one, but quantumhealingpractitioners.com. And that's like the yellow pages for healers across the world. And I'm so proud of this creation because it is so specific we have hundreds and hundreds of members already. We're approaching about 600, I believe, right now. And we're adding more people all of the time. But you can be very, very specific using the little search feature right at the front page for things like language, for things like country, for things like modality. So you can even, for example, you can say, I'm looking for an EFT practitioner who speaks this certain language in this particular part of the world. Or I'm looking for somebody who does Akashic Records reading online. Or I'm looking for somebody who does intuitive sessions online, mentorships or coaching. We support all of those people in an abundant, amazing place. And here's something that we do, Bernard, that, and believe me, I've spent a lot of time looking. And if I'm getting ready to say something that's wrong and somebody can send me a URL, you let me know. There are other people out there who have tried to create a directory like this. This isn't a completely unique idea, but to survive, those people have to have some income to keep the structure going and to keep it all going. You know how that works.
Oh, yeah.
So most of these directories, and I've only seen a handful, but the ones I have seen, they have set in place a way where a lead from a client is something that you pay for. So you pay a percentage of whatever session you book as a lead to pay for that directory. We don't do anything like that. Nothing like that. We take absolutely no money from anybody. But for a membership fee to remain on that directory as a listing, a very small fee that also gives you access to our archivable and searchable forum. And there's no contracts either. It's month to month. So, and it's very, very inexpensive. It's $10. Right now, our basic subscription rate is $10 to be listed on our directory. And you get the forum community as well. And the more people that show up, the more we will grow and the more we will help each other. So this is like the perfect and most brilliant creation of what we were talking about, which is stepping into yourself and your own power as an authentic individual, and yet connecting with community where everybody supports themselves, each other, while supporting, the group as a whole, and then offering our services like that to the world. And so that, in a nutshell, is what we're doing at quantumhealingpractitioners.com.
I think that's really cool, Candace, because it is very difficult. A lot of people are looking for specific types of healing. I mean, it's funny, even for myself. I probably should consider joining that listing. A lot of people don't know that I'm a Reiki master, or that I do shamanic soul retrieval, or that I do counseling. A lot of people are like, oh, I just heard you're a Reiki practitioner. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing it for 25 years, and so it's very, like I said, a lot of people are looking and they have nowhere to go. So I'm really glad that those who are searching have a place to go, as well as those of us who do the work have some place to be found. It's a little hard to get your website out there when it could be easier just to be in a directory.
That's exactly right. And you know what? Our individual listings, Bernard, we have all kinds of people out there who really struggle with the idea of having a website. A lot of people who don't even want a website. You know what? Each listing on our directory, it's not just a name. It's not just a picture. You can add video, you can add articles, you can add descriptions. It's really easy, and we hold your hand and help you. And we also do shows kind of like what you're doing right here. I have a Meet the Practitioner show.
Nice.
And I continually support other practitioners. And here's what I'm really excited about, Bernard, more than almost anything. I'm getting goosebumps just saying it. People like Alba Weinman, some other people, I have a friend and a practitioner on our list called Julia Aurora Ray. She developed her own modality. She calls it gem healing. And where does somebody like that go to list themselves? Reiki practitioners may have Reiki directories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. but we list everybody, including if you're the only one who practices your unique modality. So we're here to run the gamut, and I would love to talk to you about joining us and combining forces, and maybe that's why we took a couple years
yeah.
catch back up with each other after all this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this, and again, this is a service that's been needed in our community for a very long time, and it's nice to know that it is global and people have an opportunity to connect with people from around the world. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I know that there is some type of event coming up in Florida. I hope it's not been canceled. Is it in Florida? Sarasota?
Yes, it's
Okay.
actually
Well,
Sarasota,
it shouldn't be
Florida.
too bad. You got a few weeks to clean up before. But so
Right.
is it like a quantum healing convention, or tell us a little bit about what's happening at that gathering in Florida?
Well, thank you so much for asking. I can't wait to get to Sarasota. This is going to be, and believe me, of course, all eyes and all ears and all thoughts were on Florida, like, and the whole rest of the eastern United States as all this was happening. But we're holding a consciousness shifting event for the public there in Sarasota, Florida, right in the Holiday Inn, in the convention room there, right across the street from the Sarasota Airport. It's a 2-day event. It's called the Quantum Healing 5D and Beyond. And I'm sponsoring it along with my really good friend, Michelle Walling. And Michelle Walling is also a radio show host and a contributor to in5d.com. And we're all really good friends with Greg Prescott, who also runs that website. I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of that website. And this is, another one of that community connection thing, right? So there are many, many people going to this. There's still tickets left. There'll be many healers there. There'll be many quantum healers, people who do Dolores's work and others. Alba Weinman is our keynote speaker. And we have some other really super speakers. Andrew Martin, who does amazing energy intuitive forecasts. Katya Turner, same thing. They're going to get together and do their thing on stage. We have Heather Alice Shea. She's an expert on your higher self and how to communicate with that. And then we have Sian Chua, who is coming all the way from Australia to talk about what she's doing using something called a light to help people's consciousness. And it's a 2-day event. And the first day, we're actually going to be doing some wonderful participation things. We're having some sound healing events. We're having some meditations. And I myself am going to be leading a group regression the evening before the main event, which is on Saturday. And Saturday is all the speakers. So October 6th is when it starts. October 7th is when all the speakers are going to come together. And then on October 8th, we're all going to meet at the 99.9% quartz crystal sands of Siesta Key Beach, and we're going to do a drum circle. And we're going to bring all of that energy there to the beach and stand on top of that beautiful white sand and raise our consciousness and frequency by gathering together in love and support of each other. I can't wait.
Oh, that sounds like a blast. And I love Sarasota. It's so beautiful there. I hope it's still beautiful. I'm sure it will be. I'm very interested in hearing how your group regression goes, because I haven't done a group regression yet, but I'm on the verge of offering that service. So I'm wondering, you'll have to let me know how that goes. Have you been doing group regressions already?
I've been doing group regressions ever since I started working with Dolores. So all the way back. Yeah, all the way back in 2008, I started doing them because some people, they like to dip their toe in this idea and check it out a little bit before having a full-blown one-on-one session. And, the thing that I want to talk about when I ever talk about this idea of group regression is the possible things that can happen even in those sessions. I've led many of them over the years. I've also benefited and was blessed to experience the ones that Dolores Cannon would do in some of her conferences and get-togethers. And let me tell you what, I have seen outrageous things happen in group regressions that I don't think is well publicized, which is sometimes instantaneous healings, instantaneous understandings of events or issues, complete revelations of, what an actual problem is that you might have been, misdefining for a while. A whole lot of really interesting things can happen in a regression. It's not always the case, but just like one-on-one sessions, you just don't know about these things, but they're always fun. They're always fascinating. And the one that I'm going to be doing down in Sarasota, I'm pretty sure is going to focus on this idea of Sarasota being one of a number of the cities of light that are now coming into human consciousness across the planet. Right now, these cities of light are something that's kind of in our imagination. They're coming through in channelings and intuitive information in different places. When you hear about this idea of holding space, or you hear this idea about the light grid, or you hear this idea about blooming where you're planted, etc., etc., this is one of the things that we're going to be, I think, thinking about and focusing on the group regression, this concept of being together there in the newest city of light.
Oh, nice. And I love this whole idea that we're talking about the cities of light and creating this grid. I've been in a few of those events, and they're really freaking amazing, is all I can say. That's fantastic. I'm so glad you're doing that. So as the, well, I mean, it's been a crazy year, I have to admit, when it comes to politics and weather and actually even the growth of the spiritual and metaphysical community. There's been a lot of changes, and I wonder, what are some of your observations this year for the spiritual community, and maybe moving into next year? What do you feel coming? What do you feel has been going on, the energy?
Oh my gosh, another huge question. Well, I think it's easily and simply put in a lot of different ways, but this one's one of my favorite. The time for control, for fear, and for guru worship is gone. It's just gone. And what I have found, I'm sure you've seen this too, right, Bernard? We in the spiritual, metaphysical, New Age community, and some of those terms are, they're falling out of favor, and for good reason. But we've said we've been against those things, right? Or in general, we get rid of the fear, get rid of the control, get rid of the all of that stuff. And yet, so many in our community have modeled their businesses or their teachings around exactly that, right? Around exactly this. I'm the teacher, so do it only this way and do it just this way. And if you don't do it this way, then you're not part of this. And all of that is falling apart. And so what we in the New Age spiritual light worker, and again, some of those terms are not well even liked anymore. Yeah. People don't even like the term healer anymore. And I get it. But what we are learning is that each of us have our own divine aspect to shine, like the facet of a diamond that is completely unique to us. And we don't need to be like the person next door to us or the person down the street from us, or even, example, my beautiful teacher, Dolores. She is I wouldn't be where I am today without her support, her foundation. But that doesn't mean I need or want to be her clone, not in any way, shape, or form. And so this idea of having to put in all kinds of lengthy effort and massive study and all kinds of time and following some sort of leader and guru, that I think is one of the biggest things that is falling apart here in 2017. And that doesn't mean that we don't have communities, that we don't have spokesmen, that we don't have leaders in a way that bring others to the team, right? That doesn't mean that falls apart, because some of us are just more naturally that personality where we kind of head up and begin stuff or whatever, and then we bring along everyone. But this separation between like leader and followers and teachers and students and gurus and people who wannabes, that is going away. I think that's the biggest thing that's going away. It's going away in our bigger issues, again, in politics and religion, etc., and it's going away in our community too.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. You're making me feel good about the work I'm doing. I've always my philosophy, and I feel that it might have been a hindrance in the past, but my philosophy has always been that I don't teach my students to be a good student. I teach my students to become a teacher. And I look at them as an equal, and I've always done it. I've had people pull away from that because, oh, well, you're not being a good teacher. Well, I'm trying to teach you to be a teacher. I don't want a follower. I want someone who's going to get that innate connection with their higher self, with their spirit, and to be able to express themselves individually. And it's pretty funny. A lot of people did not like that. So hopefully now we're starting to see that come into fruition as our consciousness matures, I guess is a good way of saying it.
Well, you know, Bernard, we've all been programmed. Every single one of us, especially people, you know, my age, I'm in my late 50s. We, at a very young age, are taught to go to a school where there's somebody in charge and we have to give them the right answer. I mean, if it's as simple as what's our name or whatever, we are taught there's somebody here who's in charge and we're the new ones and we don't know, and there's a right answer to all of this. And it's this very basic thing, I think, that's shifting and changing. And the thing is even us in the spiritual community, we've been programmed in a way when we're little. So even though we're trying to break out of it, that programming runs deep. And I think that's what's falling apart right now. And those who don't like it that you're saying, you know, that you're not the teacher, well, we're just kind of shedding some of that old stuff. And there's room for everybody. And this
Absolutely.
None of this is to negate any of our foundations and our teachers and our wise ones before us. It's not at all. Not at all.
I agree. And I hate to say this, but we are completely out of time already. Wow, this was great. Thank you, Candace. Where can people find more information about you?
Well, quantumhealingpractitioners.com or CandaceCraw-Goldman.com. Call me, connect. Love to have you join us.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Candace. And I'll see you here again next week. We've got another great show coming up. I love you guys. Have a great week. Bye-bye.